I think it's safe to say that this has been one of the worst home schedules for the Georgia football fans in quite some time. Thankfully, Georgia did play one massive night home game last weekend when the Tennessee Volunteers came to town. Sanford Stadium was rocking. The crowd was very, very good. I'm not sure I'd call it elite because I've seen it better between the hedges, but it was still very, very good. The blackout was awesome. Everything involved with it was top notch, right? And the whole time when Georgia was beating Tennessee for the 8th consecutive season, I'm thinking, if this crowd is going this crazy for Tennessee, and I know they're a top 10 team, I know Georgia's beaten them 7 times in a row going into that, but if they're this amped up for Tennessee, a team that they've had no problem beating by double digits for the past almost, a full decade now, I can't imagine how rocking that place is going to be when Texas comes to Athens next year, when Alabama comes to Athens, when Ole Miss comes to Athens, and when Kentucky comes to Athens. So as bad as this season was as far as a home schedule goes, next year is going to be crazy, and I expect Georgia fans to already be starting to trying to get tickets because, again, Sanford Stadium is a special place. Now, it's not consistently one of the loudest places to play. It's certainly one of the toughest places to play, and a lot of that is because of the team. The team's always going to be very good. But you look at the numbers, the eyeballs, how many millions and millions of people have watched Georgia this year. It's wild. People watch the Dogs, and next year they're going to have most of their big games at home, right? This year at Alabama, at Ole Miss, at Texas, and the numbers are through the roof, right? I mean, everyone watches Georgia football, whether you're a Georgia football fan or not. I mean, especially this year because the schedule's been so tough, right? And it feels like every other week Georgia's playing in the biggest game of the week. And I've joked to buddies, like, the rest of college football should be thanking Georgia for these big, great games that they're putting on and these top 10 matchups. Because you can always, not always, but most weeks you can count on Georgia playing a really tough opponent this year. Next year is not going to be any different, but it's going to be a little easier because those games are in Athens. And it got me thinking to some of the best, loudest, craziest, Georgia home games that I can remember and that I was at. The first big one that I was in attendance for was that '04 LSU game. It gets forgotten because it was, 20 years ago. But that place was rocking. LSU defending national championships, Nick Saban coming in, and Georgia absolutely smoked them. All the better players on the team, they all made plays. It was fantastic. Obviously, the blackout in 7, LSU 13. Auburn coming to town gets them riled up a little bit. The 14 Auburn game was great as well. I believe it was the 2009 Auburn game was pretty crazy. But I mean, they've had some big moments, and obviously going into the Kirby Smart era in 17, that's where it all started. That noon game, right, against Arkansas, place was going nuts. So if you're a Georgia fan, you have to be absolutely thrilled with what's coming next year, because a lot of those games are going to be at night. Georgia, Alabama, probably going to be a night game. Georgia, Texas, probably going to be a night game. We'll see about Georgia, Ole Miss, but there's a real chance that could be a night game as well. So we're talking about several major electric, elite atmospheres coming to Sanford Stadium next year. And listen, there were several 5-star recruits. I mean, there was a load of talented, gifted recruits who were at that Georgia-Tennessee game. And everyone I've spoken with said, man, that place was nuts. I would love to play in that atmosphere. The stadium was rocking, the lights, the music, the whole thing, the whole environment, the culture was top notch. And we're going to see more of that type of atmosphere next year. And, I think Georgia's going to be really good again next year. But again, with all these eyeballs on the Dogs, that's when these 5-stars from Texas and California and Ohio, New Jersey, wherever, they become used to watching the Dogs just about every week in college football as kids. So they know what that G looks like everywhere Georgia goes. And listen, the road schedule's not bad either. I mean, Georgia plays at Tennessee, at Auburn. As far as traveling goes, that's about as good as it gets, right? You're not going past Knoxville to Lexington. You're not going past Auburn to wherever. I mean, that's closer than Tuscaloosa. They go to Starkville next year too, which that's going to be a bummer. But Georgia fans, they travel. And they'll show up to Tennessee and Auburn like, they do. There will be pockets there, but Georgia's going to be some big games next year. And that's what we were kind of missing out of this year. It just felt like not every week. Again, I say that. We're 10 weeks into the season. So not every week, but a lot of weeks, Georgia's got a big road game. And as Kirby Smart says all the time, right? It's tough to play on the road in the SEC, no matter if you're playing Kentucky and Lexington, which can obviously be tricky, or, going to Ole Miss after you beat your biggest rival the week before in impressive fashion late in the ball game. You have to go to Ole Miss. Oxford play a red hot Ole Miss team that was built to beat you. Let's not forget that. Lane Kiffin didn't build this Ole Miss team to beat Alabama and LSU and Texas. He built that team to beat Georgia. Nobody else. And he said that. He said, if we want to go to where we want to be, we got to beat Georgia. Not these other teams, the Dogs, right? So I'm telling you, more and more, year after year, the Georgia brand, the Georgia program gets more respect nationally. It already should have all the respect in the world. But again, when I was growing up, Georgia wasn't that national brand that it was now. And you didn't see kids in California and in Texas and Arizona, wherever, telling me as recruits, man, getting that Georgia offer was a big, big deal. I've been watching Georgia since I was a kid. It's because they're really good. They play against the best teams, and they play in great environments. And, if you're these TV networks, you want the Dogs to play, on your station, right? And ABC, ESPN, they are absolutely loving what the Georgia Bulldogs are bringing to them. They are a cash cow. They also obviously play in Jacksonville against the Gators next year, and they play in Mercedes-Benz against the Jackets. So, again, that's kind of a home game, too, for Georgia. Again, they play the Jackets next week in Athens. They play in Atlanta next year. Next year could be one of the greatest Georgia football schedules of all time. And this year is one of the toughest of all times, but next year could be one. It's going to be tough still, but it could be one of the best because of the environments that we're going to see. Alabama hasn't come to Athens in a while, right? Is it 15? I'm asking y'all like you're in front of me and can answer back. Let me know in the comment section. Was it 2015? The wet out, right? It wasn't the blackout. It was the rain out. The Crimson Tide came and washed Georgia away. So the Tide will be in Athens. I can't imagine the bar scene that week, that Friday and Saturday nights could be crazy, but it's going to be a massive deal. The whole world's going to watch. The local guy in Norway or Italy or Brazil, whoever, who's never heard of football, they're going to be tuning into that Georgia-Alabama game in Athens. No one's going to want to miss that. Texas, the Longhorns coming to Athens. It's going to be crazy. We're going to see like a Notre Dame 2019, Tennessee 2022 type of environment several times next year. If you're a Georgia fan, you couldn't ask for much more. The Dogs right now are in a position where they're going to be in the college football playoff. If they beat Georgia Tech, this still could be a very special season. And next year, we don't really know what the team's going to look like completely because we don't even know who's going to be the quarterback next year. I mean, Gunnar Stockton is clearly the backup. We don't know if he's going to start next year. I think it's about a 50-50 chance, right? He's got to earn it still. They could go to the portal and get someone massive. We don't even know what Florida's going to look like. They've got to keep that's another video for another time because the transfer portal, these teams look completely different at times from year to year. So we don't know how good Texas is going to be with Arch Manning or Ole Miss and their new quarterback. Alabama with their new quarterback. So Georgia can absolutely win any game against any team in the country if they're playing between the hedges because that crowd, as we've seen in the past, it's not every week and it could be a little more consistent, but when Georgia beats all these teams consistently, yeah, I understand why the crowd doesn't necessarily get up for Mississippi State or Kentucky or Missouri or even Auburn anymore. Like, I get it. They're used to the Dogs just crushing them and eating them up and spitting them out. But next year, Kirby Smart is going to need that crowd in some way, shape, or form to help them beat Texas and Ole Miss and Kentucky, which they should have no problem with. They haven't lost to Kentucky since Nam, I think. It's 2009, but close enough. But they're going to need it against Alabama, too. That's going to be one of the biggest games in Georgia football history, or in Sanford Stadium history, I'll say that. The Tide coming to Athens next year. So as bad as it's been this year, Georgia fans, they earn what's coming to them next year. They deserve what we're going to see between the hedges when the Dogs take on some of the best programs in college football next year. So Georgia fans got to be thrilled with the future. It's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. But this season is not over yet. The Dogs have a chance to do something really special again. Got to get healthier. Got to be a little more consistent, but they still have everything in front of them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you over on the website.